Okay, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to make a freeform fascinator. It's very easy to make. Okay, first thing first, you prepare your fascinator. I folded it to make from a triangle. Can you see I folded it into a triangle? But in this particular video, I am cutting it into two. But what you are going to do, you are not cutting it into two. Can you see it is folded here? Okay, this end where you have the pins, that is where your bias is, and that is where you'll be measuring. So first thing you do is to remove your 3 inches that you will use for your bias, because you are going to bind the edges of your work. So I measure 3 inches there, and I removed that 3 inches first. You don't ever forget that. So the piece of work that we want to do, we need 4 inches only. So what I'm doing again is using pins to hold the two ends together, because you don't want one end to be below or above the other. The two ends must be well aligned. And the only sure way of getting that is by using pins to hold the two ends together. So hold the two ends together and measure out. So in this case, I'll be using 4 inches. 4 inches is all we need for the work we want to do. So excuse me, please. I have a bit of cold. So I'm measuring out 4 inches at intervals, because I don't want to miss any point. I don't want any point to be higher or lesser than the other. So at different points along the length, I measure out my 4 inches. I want absolute accuracy. So after measuring out, okay, I'm actually trying to measure the length of what I have to work with. Okay, you may measure it, you may not measure it. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so after you are sure that you have done the correct thing, cut out your piece. Okay, so I'm cutting out my 4 inches there. So the work begins shortly. Okay, the next thing is to remove the middle pin. Oh, okay, I'm just measuring again, just to be sure. You want accuracy in your work. You don't want any error, not an error whatsoever. Okay, so after measuring, I remove the middle pin and fold the two ends together. What I want to ensure, what we want to achieve is that we want to have um, a form of sharp end, not exactly sharp, okay, but we want to create a particular shape or form, whichever English you choose. Excuse me, whichever English you choose to use. As you can see again, I'm trying to ensure that I have a good alignment. Yes, that's the word. Good alignment of every piece or all the ends of my sinamay fabric. And then there is an edge that sinamay has. In Yoruba, they call it etiaje. That end is hard, it is tough, it is more like several threads or several strands of the fabric are put, in there, just because it is the beginning. So I'm cutting off every loose end or every end that I do not want, and I will make my work difficult or unattractive. Okay, so I'm just measuring again. Okay, in this case, I'm measuring all the ends. I want to know the length. I can't use the word circumference now because it's not a circle, but I'm measuring around this form that we have cut. So I'm measuring around, including the sharp ends. Every end on this piece is important. So that is what I'm doing here now. Marrying it out, and I have 46 inches from the end where I started to where I begin. Okay, forgive me, I always have my glasses on because it has become part of my work there. Don't mind me. So thread your needle now. Now, after measuring your fabric, you want to measure the wire you'll be using. In this case, because it is a free form and you want your piece to, by the time you finish, you want to be able to mold your piece into whatever shape or form you wish. So you are going to use a wire that is quite malleable. In this case, in this project, I will recommend 0.8 mm diameter. The wire you use 0.8 mm diameter. So we will start our work from the middle. You determine the side that will be at the back. Okay, I'm going to say this again. Determine on your fabric the side that will be at the back of your headpiece by the time you finish it. So from the midpoint, you start sewing. You are not starting from any edge. You are starting from the middle. Or well, I advise you start from the middle because I realize that it's quite um, meaningful when you do it that way. So we are going to use what we call blanket stitches. When you put in your needle, your threaded needle, insert it into the fabric while the wire is at the top, pull your thread over the needle and bring it out. So there is a form of envelope that you have over each stitch. As you sew round, you have a blanket. When you get to each of those ends, you bend your wire. Here I'm using my finger parts because the wire is quite malleable. Well, if you wish, you can use a plier. At some point, I actually used a plier because I needed to get an adequate form. And when you get to the end or any part that is angulated, you want to make your stitches many at the angles. You want many stitches at an angles just to make your work neat and to hold the angles in place well, or to hold the angles in place better. Sew along. When you get to the next angle, you bend your wire again to ensure that the end of your fabric, in this case your sinamay fabric, fits into the angle that you have created with your wire. Because there is an end or a sharp end, there is a corner at your fabric, and you want everything to just come out perfect. Okay, so see what I'm doing now. I bent the wire so that the end of my sinamay will fit into that corner. At some point, yes, as I said earlier, I actually used a plier because there's a limit to what your hands can do. Besides that, when you have an instrument that you can use, why not go ahead and use it? Okay, so continue your stitching, and again, don't forget at every angle, create many stitches there so that your work is well fitted and is well perfected, so to speak. As you can see now, I used the plier there so that the corner piece is well made. Now that is done, pick up your bias strip and begin to fold into two equal halves. As you can see what I'm doing, as I'm folding, I'm pressing the end because I want it to be as visible as possible. I don't want any mistakes, no mistake, no error. Okay, I just want it to be perfect. So pressing it down, you are folding it into two equal halves. The 3 inches we cut earlier, remember. So you fold again such that the edges are inside. You're going to fold again so that these edges, the ends rather, of your fabric are not outside, as you can see. Now, one thing you are going to do there is that the first layer that you fold is going to go a bit beyond the middle point that you marked initially. That part where you bent your fabric into two equal halves. The first piece we go a bit over the end, and then the one the other end will go over it because you want it to be stronger, and then you don't want your wire to be visible. So you do all that up to the last end. So when you're done with that, cut out your excess. You don't need those ends. Oops, sorry about that. Sinamay fabric is quite tough, so it picks pieces of other things that are around. Then you pull. One thing that will make you know that you're working with bias is if your sinamay can be stretchy. Once you cut out the bias, you have a very stretchy piece with you. So pull to the last. Keep pulling along the entire length of your sinamay bias. Pull, make it stretchy, because you may decide to use the entire length and you may decide not to use the entire length. But remember that you have measured your work around and it is 40 something inches. I don't know what you are going to do with yours eventually, but I want the bias to be adequate and even have it. Now it's time to bind the edges. To bind the edge around. We are covering the wire and making the work beautiful. So here we are not using blanket stitch again. We are going to stitch in such a way that your stitches will not be visible. I just suddenly forgot the name now. Excuse me. So I'm just preparing the ends. You knot your thread. Once you've knotted your thread and you've inserted your needle, create a loop. Insert your needle into the loop and pull it through. And then by that, you have laid the foundation for your stitches. So you can have a few stitches at that very end just to ensure that your work is tight. It's not going to come off or come loose. So two things you are doing there. You are creating a loop with your knot at the end, and then you are creating several stitches at that very end where you are beginning. Okay, so begin your work. Slant your needle as you insert it in at one end. The same end where you slant. Throughout till you finish, you keep slanting, and then at the other end, ensure that your needle enters in where the thread came out. I'll say that again. Slant your needle not far away from the last piece. Bring it out. Once you bring it out, let it come in at the very point where the needle came out. That's where you put it in. Bring it out at the other end and then slant again. Don't mind me, it's not very obvious that I'm slanting there, but you're going to slant your needle so that your stitches are not visible. Okay, so that is how you keep doing this. Process may be slow or it may seem slow, but that is what you will do until you have gone around and you've covered the edges of your work and your work is coming out neat. So keep doing this on and on. When you get to the corners, please watch closely. We want neat corners. So I don't have to describe it, just watch closely what I'm doing to make sure that your corner is really neat. So what you have at this side that you are seeing is also at the back. I'm not showing it now. I'm not showing it here, but trust me, it's the same thing. If you look at that end very well, you see that you have the same thing there. So you bend it in such a way that you have a neat corner. Can you see? I'm sorry if it's looking a bit tough or difficult. I just want to be sure that it is perfect. That's why you see me manipulating here and there. It has to be a perfect job. Okay, so once you are done with that, continue your stitching and finish up your work. At every corner, that is what you will do. At every sharp corner, rather, that's what you do. Now, this is the very end. I want to finish it up. You may cut off this end and you may not. But I did this in order to show you this very end. Because if I did this, you might not be able to get it. See how it goes, please. Just watch. Fold it down at one end and then cover it up like so. If you have to replay this part, please do, just to be sure that you get it correctly. Mind you, if you don't get it the first time, I can assure you get it the second time. Practice always makes perfect. Excuse me. So once you are sure that you have done that, made it neat, complete your work using your needle and thread. Finish up, stitch those ends. Okay, there I was actually trying to use my nose plier to have a perfect coverage of that end. I didn't want any exposure. I wanted it to be neat and perfect. It's quite important because finishing is almost more important than the whole process altogether, because that is what will make your work to come out beautiful and very attractive. So once you are sure that you have covered that place very well, stitch it all up just as you've been doing. Complete your stitching and then we are good to go. Now see, perfect work. Just look closely. I'm sure you can see that it's beautiful. The next step, we want to iron our piece. We'll stiffen it and iron it, make it stronger and make it firmer. So I'm just trying to plug my iron because I can't leave it plugged while doing all those other things, and I don't advise you to do this. So when you get to this stage, just plug in your electric iron and then prepare your PVA or stiffener, fabric stiffener. I use PVA glue. I dilute it very light, and I mean very as light as possible. It's not going to be thick. That's what I mean. It's not going to be thick at all. Get your spray bottle. Can you see? That's the spray bottle I use for PVA. Very light, very light, and I mean very light. It's not going to be thick at all. Okay. Now, this white piece of fabric you are seeing is what I use to protect the surface of my iron. Okay. I use that to protect the surface of my iron. You notice that the fabric was dirty, as in has stains. Yes, that's because I've used it for different dyed sinamay. So that's it. You can see, trying to make everywhere wet with the PVA that I've diluted well. Adequate dilution. So ironing proceeds. This iron was hot at this point, and I was just ironing back and forth, back and forth. Both the edges and the body of the fabric. When that is done, it is time to shape. Once you've got the shape you want to achieve, you stitch up. Okay, so excuse me, this one, after it has been ironed, has become very stiff and firm, and of course the 0.8 wire that we stitch to the edges also added to the strength of the fabric, making it a beautiful piece. So we are looking at this. That's all that we are going to do. You can see that we didn't use, or that we are not using so much fabric for this headpiece. Okay, so I'm just trying to, adjust it here and there to see the beauty that will come out of this. You are very free to create the shape that you want. So Okay, so I had a mirror in front of me. Please, when you're working, you should always have a mirror in front of you, okay? So I placed it on my head and was trying to see what it would look like in front of me. And then at some point, I also used this mannequin, you know, just to create the shape that I wanted, all right? So once you have got that, stitch up, stitch your shape or form that you've chosen to create from this. And that is what I had to increase the speed here because you already know how to stitch. So there's no point going over that again. You have to save time and all of that. Can you see? Now I place the headband. The headband used here was made by me. I didn't buy anyone from the market. So I placed the headband on the mannequin and placed my stitched free form now, let's call it free form now, on it in order to determine the positioning of the headband on the headpiece. Now you can see this end. I have stitched it already. Now I want to show you how to cover up the edges where I stitched the headband onto the freeform fascinator. I I folded into half and then I folded it lengthwise first. Then I folded it along the width, making how many folds now? 2 folds. Okay, can you see? 1 fold, and then that's the second fold. Because I need to cover where I stitched. You don't want your stitches to be visible, okay? There is no crime in it, but it will not be beautiful. So you can see that end where I attached it. I covered it up with that one, and then your job is done. Your job is done. This is what you have. And once you have achieved this, you can embellish it as you like. This is beautiful, but it is not beautiful enough because you need to, you know, add different things. And it's so high. Just look at it. It is high, simple, and beautiful. And see how I chose to embellish mine. I made the flowers, I made the headband, I made these fabric flowers myself. Thank you.